Well, there's been ongoing fallout over our new nuclear subs and the AUKUS treaty with the US and the UK. Will we ever get the subs? Will we, won't we? Plus China making all sorts of threatening noises. Tony Abbott wanders off to Taiwan, tugs the tiger's tail over there. Joining us now is Michael Shoebridge, a specialist in defence, strategy and national security at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute to make sense of it all. Michael, great to see you. How are you?
Good, Rowan, and you?
We're very well. Now, can we build these subs or can we not build the subs? Do we get nukes? Do we not? What's happening?
Well, we're going to get nuclear submarines, but we're not going to get them for some time. And I really hope we're not going to try and do it as a cottage industry here in Australia, but as a bigger submarine enterprise approach with the US and UK, both of whom know what they're doing. I think more importantly, even than when the first Australian nuclear submarine turns up, is when all the other fast-moving technology that was in that AUKUS agreement turns up, and maybe when we're porting Royal Navy and US Navy submarines out of Australia.
Rita.
Michael, I'm interested in whether we can trust the US to be a good ally through China's aggression. Can we trust the US to stand with Taiwan? Are they even capable of defending Taiwan if China were to invade?
Well, I think Beijing thinks so. And every US president that they've looked at, they've had real concerns about what decision a US president might make. They might be uncertain about Biden, they're uncertain about Trump, but they know US military power would cause profound damage to Beijing. And Beijing knows it probably can't control a conflict and limit it just to Taiwan. So I think that, plus the big congressional bipartisanship in the US on China now, should give us all encouragement.
James.
On Saturday, Xi Jinping made another speech saying that Taiwan reunification would happen and that it would happen on his watch. The question I have, though, is for all of the Chinese bluster, how much ability do they have actually to project the power they need to actually invade and take over an island like Taiwan, which is not the easiest geography. You've got a long stretch of ocean that you'd have to cross to make that happen. What would that sort of look like? And can we expect that, this is in fact on the agenda and we should be expecting some sort of move on Taiwan sometime the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, James, I think you're right to realise that if Beijing thought it was easy, they would have done it by now. They've been modernising their military for at least a couple of decades with Taiwan as a priority because they know how difficult it is just to cross the waterway in numbers, let alone lodge on that difficult island. I think Xi is trying to set the conditions. He's telling the world it's inevitable and no one cares about Taiwan. But that's where we get a vote. We get to say the world does care about Taiwan. That's why Tony Abbott being there, the French senators being there at the same time, and the six-nation naval exercise happening in the Sea of the Philippines really matter because we get to make sure Xi doesn't set the conditions to use force in the next few years.
Rita.
But Tony Abbott copped so much criticism, particularly from Labor types, for being there, for disrupting the diplomacy, for antagonising the Chinese Communist Party. What's your take on that? Was that a dangerous move or was that actually showing that Australia is interested in this and we're not going to sit idly by and watch you invade Taiwan?
Well, I thought it was important that someone like Tony Abbott and those 4 French senators, one of them a former Minister for Defence, were in Taiwan right at the time the Chinese military were doing a record number of incursions into Taiwanese air defence identification zone. It shows international support to the Taiwanese, which helps their population understand that and increases their political will. So I thought it was important to do. We've had serving ministers visit Taiwan before. We had Craig Emerson do that back in 2012. Malcolm Turnbull spoke to the same forum that Tony Abbott went to just last year, and he said if he could have done it in person, he would have. We should normalise these kinds of visits.
James.
Just to go back to China again, internally though, how much, and I know it is very hard to know what is happening there, but how much of the nationalist rhetoric is about shoring up Xi Jinping's own popularity and support for his regime in the face of property sector problems, financial sector problems, and other issues that we may not even know about that go along with trying to keep 1.3 billion people fed every day?
Well, first I'd say we've got to remember the Taiwanese people in all this. You know, a lot of the time we talk over the top of their heads like they're not there, but they certainly have voices in their own future. But when it comes to the CCP and Xi in China, he's got a range of domestic and political problems. He's got the energy problems and blackouts across the country. He's got the financial sector and Evergrande property development in a whole lot of trouble. And he's put a whole bunch of the corporate world in China offside with his assertion of party power over wealthy corporate leaders. So he's got a lot of reasons to want to play a nationalist card. And for any Chinese citizen that's looking at the world, they can see that Xi has brought nothing but struggle to China. So nationalism is his way of unifying the party and the people behind him. And Taiwan's a great focus for that.
Michael, that's fascinating what you say, because I've always kind of wondered why there hasn't been a move. I know he's entrenched his own power, but why hasn't there been any kind of move against Xi? There must be any number of Chinese billionaires, politicians and others with power who are going, what has this bloke done to our lives? We used to be the talk of the town. We'd be invited to Paul Keating's place. You know, we had our harbourside mansions. We were it. And now look at us. We're you know, they won't even invite us around. What do you think there would ever be a move against Xi Jinping, or is that just implausible?
Well, actually, it's an interesting point about the sort of wealthy connections. We got told not so long ago here in Australia that the business-to-business connections were the way back to a beautiful relationship with the Chinese government. Well, now it turns out those same business people are fearful of their own relationship with the Chinese government, let alone helping Australia out through our corporate elites. I think we've got to remember the CCP has always struggled to control China, and building a bunch of wealthy people that are outside their control has now become too big a risk to the party. So Xi is recentering control away from wealthy corporate people like Jack Ma's Alibaba back into the party. And they're all fearful for their own families and their own life and security. They could end up in a Chinese jail. Same's happening in the party. Xi keeps purging people within the party, some of them for having too much ambition and daring to have different views to Xi. So he has to keep doing these purges to maintain his power. It's dangerous for him.
Fascinating stuff. Well, Michael Shoebridge, thanks so much for getting up Sunday morning to be here on Outsiders, and certainly Outsiders viewers really appreciate your insights. Thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks for the chance for the chat, Ron.